Well, thank you all for joining us tonight. Can you hear me okay? All right. We have some amazing ladies here with us tonight, and they are such great role models for young girls, and I'm very, very pleased to be able to introduce them for their presentation. Poet and education advocate Mandy Smoker is a member of the Assiniboine and Sioux tribes of Montana's Fort Peck Reservation. She holds a BA from Pepperdine University and an MFA from the University of Montana in Missoula. Okay, let's settle down now. Okay, this is where she received, she was a recipient of the Richard Hugo Memorial Fellowship. And since 2019, Mandy has jointly held the role of Montana's co-poet laureate with Melissa Quansney. Smoker's debut collection of poems was Another Attempt at Rescue, published in 2005. In 2009, she and poet Melissa co-edited an anthology, I Go to the Ruined Place, Poems in Defense of Global Human Rights, featuring 60 poems on human rights issued by 60 poets. That just sounds amazing. Smoker received a Regional Emmy Award in 2013 for her work as a writer and consultant on the PBS documentary Indian Relay. In 2015, she was named the Indian Educator of the Year by the National Indian Education Association and was appointed to the National Advisory Council on Indian Education by President Obama. In 2019, the University of Montana in Missoula recognized her as Alumna of the Year. When did you have time to write this book? She served as a director of the Indian Education Division for the state of Montana's Office of Public Instruction for nearly 10 years. There she led the state's Indian Education for All program, as well as the Schools of Promise initiative, which sought to close the achievement gap via new models for education at Montana's lowest performing schools. She currently works at the nonprofit Education Northwest as a practice expert in Indian education, focusing on equity in Native schooling. Impressive. Natalie gave me the short version. Natalie Peeterse, thank you, is the co-author of the graphic novel Thunderous. Her poetry chapbook, Blackbirds, Blue Horse, and Elegy won the Gold Line Press Poetry Prize in 2011. A second poetry chapbook, Dreadful Luminosity Letters, was published by Edus Press in the spring of 2017. She was included in I Go to the Ruined Place, Contemporary Poems in Defense of Global Human Rights, and several other anthologies. She has an MFA from the University of Montana and has been a fellow with the Arizona Commission on the Arts, a participant at the Squaw Valley Community of Writers, an artist in residence at the Caldera Institute, a participant in the 2018 U.S. Poets in Mexico and Madera, Yucatan, and most recently, a visiting scholar at the University of Washington's Whiteley Center at the Friday Harbor Laboratories. Oh my gosh. She is a recipient of the 2013 Artist Innovation Award by the Montana Arts Council. She lives in Helena, Montana, where she works on Open Country Press. So please welcome Mandy and Natalie.
Is your mic on?
I think so.
You know, Mandy, I've never been called a role model before.
I wonder why.
I don't know if that's an accurate statement. All my tennis friends know that I only use correct language on the court. Do you think we're better at poetry or tennis? Poetry.
Oh, I don't
Poetry.
know.
I'm going to say poetry.
Thank you all for coming. It's nice to see everybody. So many folks from the Helena community, all of our different circles of friends and connected family. We really appreciate you coming out. We know it's cold tonight, so thank you for that. We're excited to tell you a little bit about our journey with Thunderous. Oh, we're actually streaming online, aren't we, too? Yes.
Watch your language.
Hello, online friends. This has just been a really beautiful opportunity for the two of us to work together and to produce, a graphic novel for young children that's really important for a lot of reasons that we'll talk about.
Yeah, so Mandy and I became friends 21 years ago this fall. We actually shared an office at the University of Montana. We were in the Masters of Fine Arts Creative Writing program there, and I tried really hard to become Mandy's friend right away, you know? She had some cool art hanging in there. She's like cool and fierce. And I'm like, hi, I'm Natalie. What are you teaching? What are you reading? What are you doing later tonight? And she ignored me. And I found that really difficult because people like me, Mandy. And so somehow over the next 3 months, 4 months?
She wore me down.
I wore her down. And we bonded late at night partying in Missoula, as grad students do. And then we've been friends ever since. Now we live down the street from each other, and then my mom lives down the street from her. And so we have our little, I don't know what you'd call it, auntie culture, we call it. So during the pandemic, we spent a lot of time together with our kids. I have 2 daughters, Adela and Maggie. They're 10 and 7. And Mandy has a son named Desmond, who's 10. And we created a kind of a germ bubble because we didn't want to be alone with our children during the pandemic. So we decided to share that, and we made a ton of food. We elevated a lot of your basic standards. We elevated the hot dog and casseroles. Nacho cheese, a lot of nacho cheese experiments. And Mandy was asked to write this by her good friend Mato, and she talked to me about it, and we came up with some ideas, and then some time passed, and we signed a contract, and we had 3 months to write this book.
So our publisher, which is Dynamite Entertainment and Curiosity, Inc., they were interested, as most publishers should be, in expanding their storytelling narratives and being more inclusive of diverse voices. And that's particularly important for Native American literature because most of the children's lit out there about us is written by non-natives. So obviously that presents a problem in who gets to tell the story and what is accurate and authentic and what is made up or fabricated or is part of a stereotype. So allowing Native people and other people of color and other diverse groups to tell their own stories is really important. And so our publisher, had a basic sort of premise. They said, we'd like a story about a young person, that would appeal to 8 to 12-year-olds, basically. And we'd like it to be in a graphic novel format. Natalie and I are poets. We've, written, a bit of fiction and nonfiction and other stuff here and there, but never in a graphic novel format. And so I'll let her tell you more about that in a minute, but it was a whole new experience learning to write in this sort of style. And, we sat down at our, kitchen tables and just, hashed out a whole lot of ideas, generated a lot of content, a really, big narrative with lots of characters. And early on, it was very, very important, of course, that we include aspects of Lakota culture and identity and history and ways of knowing. So we sort of settled upon incorporating 3 of the traditional Lakota values. I hope it's not shocking to you that, Indigenous peoples all around the world hold and esteem different values from other mainstream dominant cultures. For us, for this graphic novel, we settled upon generosity, kinship, and fortitude as the Lakota values. We really wanted our young protagonist to sort of live out through the narrative, through the story. We also it was important to include Lakota language, so you'll find in the back there's a glossary. We wanted to include a Lakota traditional star story, a very important oral tradition. So we had a lot of stuff, and unfortunately, it had to be under 100 pages. So a lot of things got cut.
97 brutal pages.
But we figured it out, and we navigated sort of our way through that. And I'll let her tell you a little bit more about the technical parts of writing a graphic novel.
Yeah, a graphic novel is written in sort of a script form, and we hadn't done that before. We needed to give a little bit of narrative to the beginning, like the first page of the book is about the Wakanyan coming in. So we would write a little bit about that, and then and numbered underneath that would be any dialogue that we included, and below that would be sound effects, which I'm good at tennis, but I had never written a book that included them. And so it's very limiting, and when you read the book, you'll see that there's a very little dialogue. And technically, when they go to make a graphic novel, an artist hand writes in the entire book. So we did go back and revise once the book was in production because several things came up, and it's kind of like dominoes. If we changed something in the middle of the book, it affected the whole thing, and we had to go back and rewrite it. And so we had to be very precise about what we wanted and how we wanted it. Some of the sound effects were added by our illustrator, Dale DeForest, because he is a lifelong comic book nerd, and he actually knows what he's doing when he makes comic books, which is more than we could say for ourselves. So that was the process. It was kind of excruciating, and as soon as you wrote maybe 3 pages, you could see that not everything was going to fit. And it became a process of cutting, and we had so many brilliant ideas. I wanted the prairie dogs to be a metaphor for our collective unconscious, communicate interesting things to each other. That didn't happen. They still appeared in the book, but not in an extended way. And it really came down to focusing on several specific animals. When we started working on this, of course, we researched all the animals are from actually that area of South Dakota around the Black Hills and the Badlands. And we came up with some photographs to help Dale imagine that space that we wanted. He's Navajo, so it's a little different than the landscape he grew up around. And honestly, he just did it. He really never asked us anything.
We had given the animals personality characteristics that we wanted him to sort of embody in his drawings. And we, like the characters modeled after my niece Erica, so he had pictures of her. We sent other pictures for like the grandmother character. So he had an idea of what we were sort of looking for sure. But we told the publisher up front, we will not do this without a Native artist. And this wouldn't be what it is without his tremendous skill and talent. Dale really...
We're kind of nothing without him.
We really are in awe of his work.
And we'll show you a little bit in a minute. Anything else we should say that you can think of?
No, I think that's good for now.
Okay, here's Dale and his Gmail, and he's also on Instagram. If I know all you people have Instagram. Miho, I bet you have Instagram, don't you? I'm just teasing you. He does all kinds of stuff on Instagram, and he does a bunch of Native superheroes. So a lot of his illustrations are like what you would think of a contemporary superhero like Wonder Woman or Superman, and then they have a spin on them with special powers. He's very amusing to follow on Instagram, and we'd love for him to get all the work there is in the world.
So we'll just tell you a little bit about our main characters. Ayana is a young Lakota who, like my childhood experience, has left the reservation and moved to live with her grandmother in a more urban area. Our urban area is Rapid City, South Dakota. And so she's trying to adjust because it is an adjustment. Leaving, anybody knows if you live in a very small, rural, interconnected community, especially for me, a reservation where culture and language and identity are all very present and very intertwined. And then you go to a city where you're in the minority and people don't necessarily look like you, don't, have the same understandings as you. It's an adjustment. And so she's struggling. And of course, like most teenagers, preteens, she's very into her cell phone. And she's, kind of, thinking about what it means to be popular, what it means to, have a social media following. That's kind of her headspace right now. So she's trying to figure things out.
And my connection to Ayana was that I'm an Army brat and I went to 3 middle schools. I always say that's where I developed my personality so that people would like me and ask to sit with me at lunch. And the second middle school I went to was in Fort Hood, Texas, which is the proud armpit of this country, if you ever want to visit that.
This is Unchi. It's the Lakota word for grandmother. This is who our main character has gone to live with. And Unchi, of course, is very, very connected and rooted in Lakota culture and belief and identity. And she's trying to impart that to Ayana. But as we said, Ayana's not focusing quite on the same things right now. So Unchi's a little frustrated that her stories and her lessons really aren't being taken in just yet.
This is Kola, Ayana's cousin. Kola is the Lakota word for friend. And Kola's a good kid. He is very connected to his cultural traditions. He makes comics about them and drawings, and he talks about them. And he's always trying to tell Ayana some significant and important connection to Lakota tradition, and she kind of ignores him. It's like the way my daughters ignore me. It's interesting.
So we mentioned this already, of the 7 values, these are the 3 that we decided to focus on for our story. And Ayana goes through, a sort of, I don't want to say magical because that's a weird word, but sort of a journey that is unique, and the next characters that she encounters all help her reinforce and validate these kinship, these values.
And they are generosity, selflessness, and kinship, and I'm sure you can associate some of those with certain animals or experiences in your own life that we focused on these to tell our story.
Has anyone ever heard of a trickster character? Yes, very important in a lot of cultural groups, in particular for Indigenous peoples really all around the world. Trickster for Lakota can come in many, many forms. A bird, a coyote, a spider. It can shapeshift as well. So for our narrative, we settled upon Raven as our trickster figure. And we've been touring around talking with students a lot about the book. And the one thing we really try to talk about with tricksters is that they serve a very, very important role within a community or within a family or a group of people. They're not, they might seem sometimes silly, ominous, deceptive, cruel, but really they sort of embody, both the negative and the positive. They're there to point out things, to humans in particular, that they might not otherwise notice, to sort of, be a challenge, and to sort of, provide a bit of conflict that really a person has to move through. So they're very powerful and very important in a lot of traditional stories.
And then we have Tatanka. This is my oldest daughter Adela's favorite character. Tatanka means bison or buffalo. And he's steadfast, he's protective, he's calm, he's there to help her out. And I love this picture because it's just such a great illustration of how big he is. And he takes the time to care for Ayana.
Shugmani Titutanka. I think we have that. I need to check the spelling on that, but I think it's Shugmani Itutanka. Okay. These are our wolves. If you ever saw Dances with Wolves, you remember this, and
remember this
Tatanka
scene,
from
yeah.
that. The wolves are really important because they demonstrate kinship to Ayana. Obviously, they travel in packs. They look out for one another. They really have sort of this, kinetic understanding among one another, and that proves to be really important to Ayana on her journey.
We've got Wanbli. That's the Lakota word for eagle. And he doesn't say much in the book. We don't quite know why. He is sort of omniscient and looking down above everyone and watching everything. He does help Ayana with a really key part of the book, that he's very distant and an observer.
Paheen is our porcupine brother that's in the story. In the narrative, there are 4 items that our main character is sort of a part of her adventure, that she has to find these 4 things. And one of those things happens to be very, very important to Paheen. And so he obviously, porcupines sort of live on the edge. They must have a very good central nervous system because they must always be wondering what's going to happen next.
They die younger because of the stress.
Yeah, stressed. So, he's, found in our story in a stressful situation, and Ayana helps him out, and he's very grateful, and then he proves to be generous as well, offering her something that will be important to her journey.
And then we have Iktomi, who's a spider, and the little kids get a little scared of this one, which is fun to see. It's fun to scare children, isn't it? Ayana needs to bring some offerings to Iktomi to get back to her grandma and her family and her cousin and her life. And Iktomi is also, some of our characters are funny. There's some jokes in here. And this is where she ends up at the end of the book to complete her final few tasks. So we're going to read some of the book to you. Did you bring your
Story
reading glasses?
time. Did you
Story
bring
time. Just relax.
blankets
Use your
and-
imagination.
One thing that really annoys us both as educators is that there are no page numbers. We would tell you what page to open to, but we can't. It's in the first third of the book. How about that?
While we do that, you might notice that my book's a little crumpled because maybe at Elk River Books I did spill white wine on it, but that's how I know which one's mine.
So, yeah, Ayana has, this is the point where she leaves our regular traditional world, and she sort of finds herself in a new space, a new realm. And so she's waking up in this new place. And she says, what happened? Where am I? I'm turning the page. The selfie. And she was supposed to take a selfie. And she looks at her phone, and it has 0 battery, so that's frustrating. And then a prairie dog comes up and snatches her phone. And she says, hey, Spiza, give that back. And Spiza is the word for prairie dog. And the prairie dogs sort of play catch. They're throwing the cell phone around. And then in flies Raven, our trickster figure, and he swoops down and is also trying to get a hold of the cell phone. And Ayana says, "Go on, Spiza, get out of here." Where am I? Where is everyone? What's going on?
What are you talking about? You're here with me. No one else matters.
You can talk?
Most observant of you. But more importantly, I'm a good listener.
Can't hear you.
I'm a good listener.
You're trying to be all dramatic.
There's a kid here in the back.
I gotta get out of here. I gotta get home.
The only one who can send you home is wise Iktomi, the spider who lives deep in the Badlands. If you are generous and make offerings to Iktomi, she might send you back to the human world. There are 4 special things she might want.
How is any of this real?
How is anything real? Do you want to go home or not? Because I'm the only one who can help you.
Yes, of course I want to go home. What are the offerings? How do I get them?
I'll make you a deal. I'll tell you what the offerings are in exchange for one tiny little thing.
Fine, yes, whatever.
It's done.
Ow! And then what happens is a feather marking appears on Ayana's hand. And then she says, "What's this?"
Why, it's the deal you just made. The feather markings will multiply and slowly travel up your hand. Finally, after 2 days, the final one will reach your heart. In that instant, you will be trapped in this world here with me forever.
What?
Unless you bring the 4 offerings to Iktomi first, of course, but I doubt you can get them all.
But you haven't even told me what the offerings are.
Silly me, they are the coat of a great animal, a backwards point, the stone of the land, and a heart song.
That's ridiculous. No one could find those.
Then I will see you in 2 days, and then forever.
So Raven flies off in one direction. Then Ayana remembers an earlier comic book drawing that her cousin Kola had made, where he was trying to tell her about ravens being tricksters and that they often do one thing, but then you're supposed to do the opposite. So she remembers Raven the trickster and makes a quick decision that she needs to go in the opposite direction of him.
And this is a great example of some of Dale's beautiful artwork. She finds herself on a journey in the Badlands here, and as you can see, it's desolate, and I always joke I probably wouldn't want to be there without my phone either. But luckily, she runs into a friend, Tatanka.
And she remembers also an earlier part of the story. She had a moment to be generous with her cousin. They found a homeless man on the street, and her cousin took some of his lunch out of his pack and gave it to the homeless man. But Ayana didn't do that because some of her peers were watching, and she felt she would be embarrassed in doing that. So she remembers that, and then she's meeting the bison, and she says, "Hey, would you like to try these crackers? Sorry, it's all I have."
And as you can see, there's a big snort there. That's one of the sound effects that we wrote into our script.
And then Ayana says, Bison says.
The bison says, "Pilamaya, I am Tatanka."
"You're welcome, I'm Ayana."
And she goes to shake the bison's hand, but he doesn't have one.
"Whoops," she says.
"Oh, Snee, it's about to get dark soon, and you aren't prepared. Please take some of my coat to keep yourself warm."
"Thank you. It is getting chilly out." So she tugs at some of the fur around the front part of his head, and it comes off, and she says, "Much better."
Clear skies make cold nights. If you sleep on this side, you will be out of the wind.
"Thank you," she says.
And I think this is my favorite illustration in the whole book at the bottom there, with Ayana cuddled in next to the bison. And if you want to know what happens, you have to buy the book.
But you know there's a big, scary spider.
I swear to God, there's a spider coming. These are just a couple questions to get you started. Mandy, how did your work as a poet impact the writing of this book?
I think our sort of now, pretty normal responses. When you're a poet, you have to be really precise with your language. We write poems, but we probably spend way more time editing them. Every word has to be just perfect. It has to be in the right place at the right time and for the right function. And so that absolutely has to be the case in a graphic novel where there are so few words, and you really have to be, you have to get them right. And so that was very helpful to us, I think.
And also from the beginning, we knew poetry would be involved in the book. There's a poem at the end of the book, and then we wrote a poem for a limited edition poster that came out with the first 500 copies of the book or something, I don't know. They don't tell us much about that kind of thing. And so that was really great, and we wrote those at the end of the project, and we just felt so strongly about the plot and what had happened, and we'd seen the illustrations by then, and so they were really easy to write. That didn't take us any time, I think, because we really felt it at the end there. How long did it take to write and publish this graphic novel, Mandy?
Well, again, we had a team with our publisher, with Curiosity, of folks that we all came together at different moments and times to talk through different things. But the actual writing on our end probably took, as Natalie said, about a good 3.5 month time period. And it was very fast because then as we were, writing the first quarter to half of the book, Dale began working on the illustrations. So we were all working pretty continuously to get it published by April 30th, which was Independent Bookseller Day. Really important for graphic novels like this, and I think that was important that our publisher really pushed for that. But it was a lot. It was really intense. It was much quicker than it would normally take to do this sort of project.
Right, and at the end, I just sort of jumped on the manuscript and wouldn't let anyone touch it because I was like, nobody messes with this from here on out. They also hired 3 colorists to be coloring the pages the whole time. Dale would turn in the roughs, they would get approved, he would finalize them, and then 3 different people would start coloring in the graphic novel, and I didn't know that that was a job. But we tell kids you could grow up to color graphic novels if you really want, I think. Since then, we have gotten a grant from the Montana Arts Council for $10,000, and we've been on a little book tour sharing the book. And we were included as a great book from Montana to the center of the book in Washington, D.C. at the Library of Congress. We weren't there, but we still bragged about it. Question? Oh, we have, go ahead. I hate it when they ask this.
Wisdom, fortitude. Oh, what were the other Lakota values we left out? Wisdom, fortitude. Kirby. I'm being a bad Lakota right now. I'm going to keep thinking about it.
What criteria did you use? I mean, what made you settle on the 3 that you chose?
Well, I think, so over our friendship, we've talked about a lot of different things. And I think one of the things that I especially is important to me as an Indigenous person is generosity. And Natalie has always been impressed by like the star quilt ceremonies that we do with basketball teams. Non-Indian families will give away these beautiful star quilts to their opposing team. And she's always been really impressed by that. And so I just thought generosity is really, really important. It's a really important thing. So that was definitely important or necessary. And then kinship also just felt really sort of natural as our character has family around, and yet she feels so isolated and helping her sort of get back in touch with that value was kind of natural.
If you do have a question, let me know so that the folks at home, where this is streaming, so that they will be able to hear the question also.
I'm just wondering why you set the novel in South Dakota instead of Montana.
It's partially an homage to my friend Mato Standing High. He was the one that brought us into this project. I'm also from North and South Dakota as well, but we chose our reservation because that's his reservation. This really wouldn't have been possible without his effort. And now he's the vice president of a whole Indigenous media arm for this entertainment group. So it was just, part of what we wanted to do.
I have a question. Where did the title come from, or do we have to read the book to find that out?
Another really important thing that we had to sort of pare down, it's really important in Lakota culture, the thunder beings, the Wakian, they come every spring. We can't tell certain stories and do certain things until that ushers in, a whole, what will become summer, which if you think about it traditionally, if you were a Plains Indian and you had been in a teepee all winter and it seemed like spring might be on the horizon, that was a really important shift, right? You're like, thank God. So the Wakian are sort of the major figure that ushers that time in, and we really wanted to feature them, as I said, more prominently in the book, but they start the book off, and then they're part of the oral tradition, the star story that we bring in later. So thunder beings, Thunderous, it all just kind of happened.
Any other questions?
We recently saw in Albuquerque a whole display of a Dinette artist who did Wonder Woman and Superwoman. And is that Dale DeForest work?
It could be, but there's another Navajo artist also that's doing a lot of comic book stuff. There's a couple of them. So it could have been Dale.
Okay, thank you.
Do we see a sequel?
Larry, I don't commit to anything until I have a contract. Leroy. That's Leroy's alter ego, Larry. We have talked about it, and the script is in development right now to become an animated feature. We don't have a lot of answers about that. We just know it's in the process. And we are working on another graphic novel that is not this same subject matter, not these same characters. And so that's in process too. And so the short answer is I don't know, but the long answer is yes.
So when you say there's a script in the works for an animated feature, is that film or an animated feature book?
We think film.
Oh,
Yeah, or
Very
a series,
cool.
We'll see. I still have a day job, everybody.
Having 3 young people with you during this time, what influence did they have on your choices?
A huge influence. They've been a part of it from the beginning. One of our first ideas for Ayana was to model her after Mandy's niece, Erica. And I've known Erica since she was little, and this weird thing happens where kids grow up, so she's not little anymore. And so a lot of the ideas I had were from Erica the year before, or 2 years before, and so Mandy's son Desmond would be like, she doesn't even like that anymore. I wanted her to have all these idiosyncrasies based on Erica, and she doesn't care about those things anymore, so he clarified that for me. They also said, was it the word nerd? We were going to have someone say something rude to Kola and call him a nerd, and they clarified that no one uses that word anymore, which I had no idea about. Yeah. Revenge of the Nerds. And so it was things like that, you know, ideas that we had that they thought were kind of dumb. And during COVID, my oldest daughter would do anything to procrastinate and not do her reading or her work because, like, I became her teacher. Lucky none of you. I hope you didn't have to go through that. It was awful. And she would just do anything to not get her reading done. But she would read graphic novels. And so that really inspired Mandy and I.
Yeah, people have asked us, wouldn't you rather, people are always like, literature versus graphic novels, and we're just like, if kids are reading and enjoying it, who cares? They'll get to the literature part as well.
So Natalie, I wonder what challenges you found as a non-native to kind of understand the characters and the kind of traditions behind each of those animal spirits, and kind of just what was tough and what was easy. That
is a great question, Captain Kirk. And I would say that, just to clarify for everyone here, I'm white, if you couldn't guess. Super white. And I think I like talking about this. I think when you are working with people of color, Indigenous people, I think it's important to take a deep breath and do a lot of listening. Mandy and I certainly worked on some of the research together, but it was her contacts, who are Lakota folks, or folks working on language revitalization, that checked a lot of our facts and asked their grandmas about some of the things. And so I really brought the skills that I could with technical writing and editing and being funny and writing poetry. And I learned a lot, but it's certainly a time to just take a back seat and listen, and then try to do your best to enact that vision. But I did have some good ideas, still. Even for a white lady, I did have some good ideas.
Any more questions? I do. I have one, of course. How much input did your kids put into this with your, how much help were they as far as reading this and giving you ideas and things?
They didn't read it. I didn't let them touch nobody could touch it. So we would read some dialogue to them and check with them in that way. But once we got past brainstorming, we kind of left them out of it because we really had to focus and get it done in 3 months. So since then, they've read the book, and they have been to 2 of these. My daughters are deeply bored by this process at this point. But my daughter ran the PowerPoints at the Montana Book Festival for me. She sat still for an entire hour to make that happen and complained about it. But we will be going to the kids' classrooms. Jefferson is next week, and sharing copies of the book with the 5th grade students at Jefferson Elementary. And then I forget when you said we're going to Smith the week after that.
But they are giving us ideas. They're already giving us ideas for the next
sequel.
It's not a sequel. It's a different topic.
Oh,
it's for older, one level up of reader, but yeah.
Nice.
Thank you. I'm just inspired by you both, so thank you for being here. And question, since you both have some background in education and you are in the schools, and there is that mandated effort to teach Indigenous history and literature, can your work sort of flow and contribute into that curriculum, do you think? Or what is the school stance in terms of graphic novels? And I mean, like you said, like if it's getting kids reading, is there some openness to incorporate it into the larger curriculum on Native?
Yeah, every school I've been in is very, welcoming to graphic novels and utilize them. As far as, books like this, that represent Indigenous people, there aren't enough of them. Less than 1% of children's books published are by or about Native Americans. So when I worked at the Office of Public Instruction, any time a book was written, we latched onto it and wrote a lesson plan about it, and would buy copies of it or sets because it's so important, and it's really, really important to have a contemporary story so that non-Native kids don't think that we all, have we're not a monolithic culture that is, set in the past, but that there are Indian kids around them and that they have cell phones. We are modern people and we exist and we're part of your communities. And that's really, really important to impart because you would be surprised still today how many young people, think Native Americans still live in teepees and ride horses and, we're sort of a relic of the past. So anytime you can have anything contemporary out there, it's really important.
Any more questions?
I'll just add on to that. The Office of Public Instruction is making a lesson plan for this book. So that's good. And we are now in the Scholastic catalogs that go, you remember that when you were a kid or you had kids? So we've been getting photos from all over the country of our book at the Scholastic book fairs, which has been really cool. And we've been reviewed for Native American Heritage Day and month. Several times I get Instagrams from strangers telling me what they thought of the book. One person called the plot tired. Did you read that? I was like, homegirl, I'd like to see you write a graphic novel.
So you said this was for 4th and 5th grade. Did you pick the level of the intended audience, or did the publisher?
The publisher sort of said 8 to 12-year-olds.
Okay.
Yeah.
You guys were in Oklahoma City a couple months ago talking about your book too at the National First Americans Museum that's brand new there.
Huh?
So we got this grant to take the books to Indian Educators Day at the National Indian Association conference, and about a week before I get this text from Andy that says, how are we going to get all those books there? We need to bring 200 books. And I was like, maybe we should have thought of this last month.
I don't even think it's
Do I have to be in charge of everything? So we had 4 bags with 200 pounds of books on the Delta flight down there. We warned all of our Uber drivers before they tried to pick up the suitcases.
But the First Americans Museum, or the first, it is the First Americans Museum, which I'm not going to get into why it's called that. But if you ever go to Oklahoma City, it is the best Native
Amazing.
American museum I have ever been to. Natalie was really impressed as well. But it was fun to give out books. Teachers love free stuff, So it was nice to see smiling faces and to know that these are teachers from New York, from Seneca tribes down to Apaches and, everywhere, all around the whole country. So it was nice to know that it'll go out there in other classrooms and other places.
Have you thought of developing lesson plans to go along with it?
That's what I think OPI is going to work on that.
Great. Any other questions? I'm hogging the microphone. Okay, well,
Thank
thank
you
you
all.
guys very much.